The NBA buyout market is a very underrated and very important part of who ends up winning the title every single season. Typically, players on big contracts who are playing for bad teams end up hitting free agency around the trade deadline after there wasn't a deal made. These players are obviously veterans, been around the league for a while. Some of them have not achieved the ultimate goal of winning an NBA title, so a lot of them are going to be signing with teams that are really good. It's a rich get richer scenario. And it's unpredictable every year. There's certain teams that end up being really good that get even better on the buyout market that we didn't necessarily expect. There's players that hit the open market mid-season that we thought were definitely going to be under contract at that point, but the situation changed and they became available. So in today's video, in advance of the NBA regular season beginning in under a week now, I wanted to take a look at the NBA buyout market, see who's out there, what teams they're playing for, what contracts are looking like, and where they might end up. My name is Ethan, welcome to Splash City. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So let's start with a pretty obvious one, but I wanted to talk about it nonetheless. He's the guy in the background, Kevin Love. His contract is for 2 years and $60 million. There have been buyout talks surrounding Kevin Love for a while now. He's been, on a pretty bad Cavaliers team for the last couple of years. He signed a big extension with them, and even when he signed the deal at the time, it didn't really make sense with their timeline. It was, just after LeBron James had left, and the Cavs were clearly entering a full rebuild. And they have been there for the past couple of years now. So Kevin Love clearly doesn't fit with what this team is trying to do. He's made it obvious that he's unhappy there in Cleveland, having moments where he's sort of throwing fits on the court, clearly showing his frustration, clearly showing that he doesn't want to be there. He would rather be playing for a different team. So it makes sense for both sides why there would be a buyout here. The Cavs are trying to go with the youth. They probably don't have minutes for Kevin Love anyway. They have a lot of guys at his position now. And so it just doesn't really make sense for him to be there. It doesn't really make sense for the team to have him. So I think it makes, both sides are motivated here to move on. But we do have reports from, over the offseason and near the end of last regular season that Kevin Love and the Cavaliers were, not considering a buyout, that there hadn't been discussions about that, and that wasn't something that was on the table. Now, we typically do hear these things, players are kind of leaking that out to show that they don't want to give up their money. If the Cavs are going to want to get rid of Kevin Love, he preferably wants it to be through a trade or them just cutting him and he gets his entire paycheck. He's not going to want to give anything back out of his contract in order to go to a different team. Now, when push comes to shove, we get closer to the deadline, those things can change, right? Kevin Love can potentially choose to give up some more money. He changes his mind. He decides he really doesn't want to be there anymore. A lot can change between now and the NBA trade deadline and the the buyout deadline and stuff. So I expect that this will be a topic of conversation leading up to that point. Now, will we get a buyout? Nothing's a guarantee. Nothing's ever for certain. But I do definitely think that Kevin Love is near the top of the list for this one. As far as possible destinations for Kevin Love go, I mean, the two that are always going to come to mind are the Lakers and the Nets. Those are going to be at the front of everybody's mouth when we're talking about buyouts and where these players might go, given that both of those teams were very active on the buyout market this past season, and they're considered to be the favorite for the title in each of their respective conferences. So, if Kevin Love wants to go back and link up with his old friend LeBron James in Los Angeles, or maybe he wants to go back and play with Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn, assuming that Kyrie does play this year. That's, I guess, a topic for another day. But those two are always going to be at the front of people's minds. I think the other one is Portland. They're probably not a bona fide title contender, but we know that he's wanted to go there. He's had interviews where he's talked about how much he loves Portland. I believe he grew up there, and he wants to go back and play with Damian Lillard and play there. So that could definitely be a possibility. I know that the Golden State Warriors were rumored as a potential destination. They could use a stretch big. There's another team, the Suns, could also be in there as a title contender who are in need of depth at the big man position, even though I don't know if he necessarily gives them what they need. Other than that, I mean, just looking at the list here, the Chicago Bulls, maybe, if they're in a good position around that time of year. You could maybe think about the 76ers. Really, any of the contenders out there, I think, would have a play for Kevin Love, given that if he does get bought out, he's probably the best player that's going to be out there on the market. So, yeah, I think the top three would probably be the Lakers, Brooklyn, and Portland. Up next here, I have Kevin Love's former teammate in Taurean Prince. He played for the Cavs last year. He was traded to Minnesota this offseason. Now, I don't think this one is going to happen. I put this one on here just because I think it's maybe a possibility. I would not bet on this. Taurean Prince is still, relatively young. He's like 27, 28. Coming to the end of a pretty bad contract. He hasn't really lived up to the money that he was signed for, and he's been, traded around to a bunch of different teams over the past couple of years. So Taurean Prince, if the Wolves' season is going poorly, and they would rather open up a roster spot for, a younger player that they can potentially sign or bring in somebody out of the G League or something like that, then I could see Taurean Prince on his way out. Now, there's a couple other guys on the Wolves roster that could also be candidates for this, but given that Prince is making the most money, he seems to fit the bill of a buyout player more so than anybody else on this roster, so that's why I have him here. 1 year, $15 million left. If they don't do a buyout, then he just becomes unrestricted at the end of the season and probably signs a minimum deal somewhere. But if he does become available, he's an intriguing guy. 3-and-D wing. You can never really have too many guys who can hit threes at least a decent rate and play at least okay defense on the wing. So he would have suitors out there if he were to become available. So if Minnesota's season is going poorly and they want to get rid of somebody, I think this could be a candidate. So teams that might be good to great at this time of year that might need some wing defense, just off the top of my head, Mavericks, the Jazz, maybe the Charlotte Hornets, the 76ers, teams that might be in need of another body on the wing. Those are, some pretty good teams. They're already all pretty good teams, but I think could maybe use one more wing defender. So that's just off the top of my head that it might be interested in Taurean Prince. Up next here, I have DJ Augustin as a potential guy here. He's playing for the Rockets. The Rockets are obviously not going to be a very good team in a really competitive Western Conference. Them and the Thunder, and we'll see a Thunder player here in a second, are the two teams that are not going to be very good. And each of them has a couple of veterans on their roster that could be up for a buyout. And I think DJ Augustin is definitely the first guy that comes to mind when you think about the Houston Rockets. He has 2 years left and $14 million on his contract. So it would have to be a buyout for these 2 seasons. Depends on how much he's willing to give back to the team. But he's a veteran. He's been around the league for a long time and could certainly help a playoff team. Now, he was obviously signed to the Milwaukee Bucks last offseason and was traded to the Rockets in the PJ Tucker deal, mostly just to be that salary matching piece going back. So the Rockets, they don't really need him. They don't really want him. They'd rather clear the way for their young guards, obviously Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., to be able to play even more minutes without having to have DJ Augustin in the way of any of those guys. Not that I'm, anticipating he's going to start over either of those two, but definitely just kind of want to clear the way for your young guards to be able to play as much as possible. So I think DJ Augustin is definitely a guy that you should look out for on the buyout market. This could happen even, before the trade deadline happens. I think this one's that obvious. I'm fully expecting this one to happen this year, unless there's something, crazy going on. But I do think that he will get bought out and go to a team that is in need of some guard play. Potential teams that might be interested, I'm looking at the 76ers. Depending on what happens with Ben Simmons, they could maybe be in need of more ball handling. The Phoenix Suns, I think, could use another rotation guard. The Warriors have been looking for a backup ball handling guard. Now, they probably don't have a roster spot, but maybe by that time of year, something opens up, so maybe Golden State. I already said Phoenix. There was one more team. The Clippers have Reggie Jackson and Eric Bledsoe now, but maybe they could use another guy who can come in there and handle the ball, score a little bit. So I think those are my teams. Yeah, I just said the Clippers, the Phoenix Suns, Golden State, and the 76ers are what I'm looking at for DJ Augustin. Up next here, I told you I was going to talk about the OKC Thunder. We have Derrick Favors. This might be the most obvious one in the league. I have no doubt in my mind that Derrick Favors is going to hit the market around the buyout line. Now, I almost said this about Mike Muscala last year. I might have said something similar because Mike Muscala was the veteran on the Thunder last year who, was clearly just around to be a mentor and not much else. He was playing for a really bad team, but he ended up not getting bought out. He decided to stay. Not only that, but he signed an extension and he's back with the team this year. So maybe Mike Muscala is another guy who could be a buyout candidate, but right now I'm looking at Derrick Favors to potentially get bought out and join a contender around the trade deadline here. He has 2 years left on his contract for around $20 million. The second season of that is a player option, but if you're Derrick Favors, you're picking up an option for $10 million just to make sure that you get that. So, I would assume that in a buyout, he would ask for, at least most of that money in that second year back so that he's not losing a ton of value there. But I think that OKC is clearly going in a younger direction. They could maybe want to keep a veteran around on this team just to be a mentor. But, I think it's the youngest team in the league. Like, I'm pretty sure about that. And they just want to clear the way for as many of their young guys to play as possible. So, unless they do want to stick with, having 1 or 2 veterans around, which might make sense to do. But if Favors wants to, and he's motivated to try to get out of that situation and go play for a contender. I think the Thunder have proven over the past couple of years that they're willing to grant those requests for veterans to be able to, not have to play with such a young, and let's be frank about this, it's a bad team. So Derrick Favors is going to probably want to get somewhere else, and if he does, I expect OKC to grant his wish. So we've got a whole laundry list of teams here that might be looking for a backup center. The Trailblazers, I think, could maybe use some more depth at that spot. The Denver Nuggets might be looking for some more size behind Jokic. The LA Clippers, who knows what's going on with Serge Ibaka's injury. Maybe they need another rotation big man. The Jazz, Favors keeps going back to the Jazz, so it's clear he likes the organization and he likes the city. So, maybe they could get him back just a year after trading him again for the second time. The Phoenix Suns, maybe. Well, I guess they did just sign JaVale McGee, so probably not for them. The Wizards, I think, could maybe be looking for another rotation big guy. I had the Celtics might need somebody. The Miami Heat and the Chicago Bulls could both potentially be looking for another big man to round out their rotation. So that's my list. Even the Golden State Warriors, I guess you could throw in there. They might need another big guy. So that's my list of teams for Derrick Favors. There's a lot of them. He's just a good rotation big guy at this point in his career. And I think if he hit the market, he'd have a lot of options. And here's the list of just sort of everybody else. These are guys that are on like 1 or 2 year contracts. Some of them are on bad teams. Some of them are on better teams. Sometimes we might see a player who is on a good team gets traded to a bad team in a salary matching deal and then get bought out from the bad team before the deadline. So that could happen for any of these guys here. Some of them I like better than others as potential buyout guys. Like there's guys on here like Kyle Anderson I think is better than everybody else on this list, but his salary sort of fits the criteria, so maybe if he has a bad season and then gets traded, that could be an option. But everybody else I could realistically see happening. Mason Plumlee, Dwight Powell, Jeremy Lamb, Serge Ibaka, Chris Dunn, Jake Layman, Patrick Beverley, Tomas Satoransky's an interesting one. I think he's non-guaranteed. Robin Lopez, Tristan Thompson, Goran Dragic, Al-Farouq Aminu. Daniel House is on a relatively cheap contract, but he's a good player. Similar to DJ Augustin, I think the Rockets could potentially move on from all of their veterans. Mike Muscala, I kind of talked about him. Gary Harris is also a little bit better than the rest of the guys on this list, but his contract is maybe too big to trade for, so the Magic could get to a point where they buy him out. And Ricky Rubio is also still a pretty solid player, but the Cavs are not a very good team, and they probably want to clear the way for their young guards to play a lot as well. So this is what I have. I think there's more guys out there that could potentially fit this criteria, but these are just the ones that, kind of came off the top of my head at first glance through the league. But I think any of these guys, if they were bought out, they would sign with somebody else and make a big impact. Like I said, I think a lot of these would only be bought out in the scenario that they were traded in a salary matching move to a bad team and then bought out at that point. Like, just for example here, let me get a good one. Who's on this list? Jeremy Lamb. Like, I don't think the Pacers would buy him out. Dwight Powell as well. Like, I don't think they would get bought out on their current teams, but if they were traded to a worse team, I think I could see that happening. So this is just my other guys, along with the ones that I already talked about. This is what I anticipate the NBA buyout market to look like. So yeah, let me know what you think. I think the NBA buyout market is always fun to look at before the season starts, because we don't know how good of a season any of these players are going to have, where they might end up, and what the scenario is going to be by the time we get to, when is the deadline? Around March, typically, like February, March for the deadline. So, we're going to be in a much different spot by then. We've got a long way to go, a lot of basketball to play, but just, opening my third eye a little bit, looking into the future, peering into the future, and seeing what could potentially happen for a lot of these players. So I always think this is fun. I did this video last year as well. So let me know in the comments down below if you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about these players. Who's going to get bought out, where are they going to end up going. So what is the market going to look like this year? Because it does always make an impact. It might not swing the title race, but it certainly can help certain teams finally fine-tune their roster as they make it into the playoffs and, down the stretch run of the season. So I think this is certainly something worth talking about, and we'll see how all this shapes up when the time comes for it to actually happen. So with all that said, like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to, leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about this. I kind of already said that, but yeah, I will see you guys in the next one.